On September 4th, 1995, the Monday Night Wars began, where World Championship Wrestling exploded onto the scene inside the Mall of America. And then we would have head-to-head ratings victories by both promotions. It was a great goddamn time, but it wasn't really a war until World Championship Wrestling started to beat and pound and pulverize the WWF, because the last time the WWF actually got a ratings victory in 1996 was on the 10th of June, and then they would continue to lose, and then they would lose by landslides and constant landslides. They had a foundation and pay-per-view, and they still had a core audience, but man, World Championship Wrestling, especially at Bash at the Beach 1996, would just continue to just sink their claws into the WWF, and they were dragging them down. They had their foot on their goddamn back. They were just destroying them, pounding them in the back of the head. 1997 was the year they went super fucking nova. Sure, things didn't start out all that great with Sold Out, and things wouldn't end all that great with Starrcade 1997 for a variety of reasons, even though it did tremendous business. But they had tremendous pay-per-view buys, and Nitro was the show to watch. That was where a lot of people decided to tape Raw and watch Nitro live. If you were like me, and I know I'm like me, and if I wasn't like me, who the fuck else would I be? And in the middle of all that, they decided to take War Games and have a swerve, bro, before that goddamn idiot even got to destroying this particular company. Well before the fall, we continue to witness the rise, even when they made mistakes, such as the finish of this pay-per-view. And as we know, all they'll remember is the goddamn motherfucking finish. I'm John Renton with the Retro Review, WCW Fall Brawl 1997 from the Lawrence Joel Veterans Memorial Coliseum in Winston-Salem, North Kakalaki. This took place on September 14, 1997, they had almost 12,000 fans in the arena, and they had just under 200,000 pay-per-view buys, 195,000 specifically. Now, that's down from a few. I'll explain why here in a bit, but this is a show that was a pick and mix bag, because there are so many matches on this show that probably should have ended a few minutes before they did. There were some false finishes that just felt like they were just extending for pay-per-view time. Realistically, if they had another match here, it might have actually benefited them, because this was an 8-match card with a big War Games main event, the Horsemen and the NWO, with a swerve that everybody could see coming. But realistically, if we look back at the previous year's event, 1996, that was in Winston-Salem as well. So really, the Veterans Memorial Coliseum became the home of Fall Brawl for at least a few years. And that had 11,300 fans and 230,000 pay-per-view buys. That's where Sting and the NWO Sting had their face-off, and Sting decided to become the Crow Sting. No Sting on this goddamn show, by the way. But then we go to 1998. That was also in Winston-Salem and had 11,528 fans and 275,000 pay-per-view buys to witness the Ultimate Warrior beat himself up and tear his bicep doing stuff because he was so roided up and fragile at that point at 40 years old. That being said, let's go to 1997. That's a good year to start, considering this event took place in 1997. And I'm going through some events that I have not retro-reviewed. I didn't realize I hadn't retro-reviewed the 1993, 94, and 95 Fall Brawls. And in traditional fashion, I decided a tradition that I've started, because I just like to have fun, facts and figures. Sold Out in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, 5,120 fans. Remember when they had the NWO ride garbage trucks in the snow, and it wasn't cool at all? I liked the stage, but Bischoff was really on one at this point. They had 170,000 pay-per-view buys. It was not very successful, mainly because even though the aesthetic was cool, I think people love the NWO, and the NWO would be successful, but this pay-per-view was a total fucking misfire. And then we go to Super Brawl, which was at the Cow Palace, 13,324 fans, 275,000 that is, pay-per-view buys for Piper and Hogan, the rematch, where Savage would turn, and Hogan would get a victory over Piper, albeit controversially. And then Uncensored in North Charleston, South Carolina, they had just under 9,300 fans and 325,000 pay-per-view buys. That was for the Team NWO, Team Piper, and Team WCW Battle Royal Elimination match thing, where Sting showed up and showed his allegiances by descending from the rafters and then beating the absolute piss out of Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, and Randy Savage while pointing his bat right at goddamn Sting. Sting point at Sting. Sting point at Hogan. That's what I meant. Sting point at Sting. It's a Sting meme. It's the Sting meme. So anyway, also, whoever the jerk was that threw the drink at Sting, I hope his arm fell off right after that. Then again, South Carolina, they don't really know much. I kid, of course. There are great people in South Carolina, just not that idiot that threw that drink. We go Spring Stampede in Tupelo, Mississippi, because apparently Tupelo was still a city that they thought they could draw in. Well, they did about 8,300 fans and did 210,000 pay-per-view buys, so they're still getting, their footing as far as pay-per-views, because 1996, they were doing better with some of these. At least, especially by the time we got to Bash at the Beach. Now, Bash at the Beach, I think, did the same as Uncensored, if I recall correctly, and then we were starting to rise up. But Spring Stampede, if I recall correctly, was NWO heavy with, more building of, Flair trying to get people together to take down the NWO. Slamboree was in Charlotte, 9,600 fans, 220,000 pay-per-view buys. If I remember right, that's Piper, Flair, and Kevin Green against Nash, Hall, and Six, I think. I know Nash and Six were in. I don't remember if Hall was in it. But that was a big deal. There were other matches as well. This is when they were getting away from the legend stuff with Slamboree. I think the last time they did that really was 95. And then we go to the Great American Bash, which was in Moline, Iowa, or Illinois, as as the map would show. 9,600 fans and 220,000 pay-per-view buys. And Great American Bash 97 was where they had the rematch of Savage and DDP, and that's actually what Spring Stampede 97 was known for. I think I want to take the Diamond Cutter tonight. And DDP really was elevated by that feud with Savage. So, anyway, the Great American Bash 97 was a rematch of that, and a few other matches as well. I don't recall Great American Bash 97 being an awful show. I just don't recall it being too memorable. And Bash at the Beach 97, that was in Daytona Beach, Florida. And they had around 7,800 fans, but they did do 325,000 pay-per-view buys. Big reason for that, Luger and the Giant against Hogan and Rodman. Because Rodman was one of the good ones for Hogan. If you know, you know. And it was a big deal. They did an arm drag, didn't even take his sunglasses off. That was a cool moment. And don't get me wrong, Rodman's a fucking crackpot weirdo, but we always knew that about him. So, Bash at the Beach was pretty successful. And then Road Wild in Sturgis, which really sounds like the noise you would make before you throw up. They had Sturgis, South Dakota. They had 6,500 fans, 240,000 pay-per-view buys. That was Hogan and Luger having their rematch after Luger had won the title 5 days before at the Palace of Auburn Hills. More on that here in a minute. And that was on the Nitro before. And then he won it back here, Hogan did. And yet none of the Road Wild, like Hog Wild, Road Wild 97, Road Wild 98, Road Wild 99, New Blood Rising, none of the August pay-per-views were ever really good, so they could have just not done an August pay-per-view. But they got that sweet pay-per-view dollar. And then we go to Halloween Havoc, the event after this, at the MGM Grand Garden Arena, 12,457 fans, 405,000 pay-per-view buys. They did better pay-per-view. You could have taken the buy rates of this and sold out and not equaled what this this particular event, Fall Brawl, and sold out and not equaled this. That's fucking amazing. And 405,000, they got to witness Ray versus Eddie. They also got to witness Piper and Hogan in a match where it looks like Piper was trying to get his face right up there in Hogan's ass, literally. And that's where Savage pretty much destroyed both his goddamn knees doing that freaking, double axe handle off the goddamn cage. He at least destroyed one knee. And I think destroyed his other knee sometime a little bit later. I think it was uncensored. He didn't destroy his weenie, but that being said. We go to World War III. That was at the Palace of Auburn Hills. Once again, 17,000. Really? They got 17,000 fans for this show? 205,000 pay-per-view buys, though. That is where Scott Hall won the Battle Royal. And, yeah, other stuff was occurring. Nothing really of note. Halloween Havoc 97 also had DDP and Savage in that sudden death match. And then Starrcade at the MCI Center. And they would do 17,500 fans. I think Shivani said 24,000 fans because Shivani cannot add. And they did 700,000 pay-per-view domestic buys. I think they did 750,000 because they got some from overseas. But that's a big goddamn deal. They also would never come close to 700,000 again. I think the closest they got was 585 or 565 for Bash 98. Like, not Great American Bash, but Bash at the Beach. So let's just move on to this event. It's the stumble into the fall, as I call it. Recast of Arn's retirement. The Horsemen, the mockery by the NWO didn't offend me as much. But to me, it also felt like there were elements of something good, but it also felt like it was a little bit self-serving. But then again, that's what the NWO does. Also, let's be perfectly honest, the Horsemen at that point, even though it was tradition and Arn's beloved, it's not as if the Horsemen really were what they once were. So Heenan, Tenay, and Shivani mostly do commentary. Larry Zbyszko joins for a bit, and we do get Eddie Guerrero trying to win back the Cruiserweight Championship, or win the Cruiserweight Championship, as it were, against Chris Jericho, who just won it recently. This is better than their Super Brawl match that they had earlier in the year, because they had been teaming up and nobody really cared. People were into it, but this was a lot more ground-based, and Eddie was more heelish. Jericho was just about to become a heel. This went a bit longer than it needed to, especially with the action. I'm not saying they needed to do head scissors and hurricanranas and all that, but it did get a little bit long in the tooth. There was a nice German for two. We got a big old superplex where Eddie landed on Jericho, hit the frog splash, 1, 2, 3. That was nice. I'm condensing it down because there really wasn't a lot. There were a lot of rest holds, which is fine. And Eddie did work on the back, which ended up leading to his victory because Jericho was just too hurt. That's fine, but I think they could have easily done this in 13 minutes instead of doing this in 17. And then the Steiners, along with Ted DiBiase in their corner, took on Harlem Heat with Jaqueline. Thank you, Chris. Thank you if you were watching this for making it. I can't say Jacqueline's name right the first time. If you get it, you get it. The Steiners are way over. Scott Steiner was too juiced at this point. It was really scary, and it would only get worse. It was a power battle. It's a good thing Stevie Ray had Booker with him, because Stevie Ray on his own was not very fucking good. There was a German suplex with a lariat that got the victory, but there were also a few near falls where it got messy at the end, and things were stumbling here. So it was like they were having some issues. The crowd was into a lot of the personalities, but they were getting burned by some of these finishes. I'm not saying they didn't want to see the Steiners win, but there we go. And then Alex Wright. I can never do the dance. It looks so simple, but I can never do the fucking dance. Alex Wright defending the TV championship against the Ultimo Dragon, who I believe would end up hurting his elbow here, and actually that would become a problem, and he would actually end up needing surgery, like on a tendon or something, and would have to rehab that, and ended up leaving WCW, I think sometime in late 97, early 98. Alex grounds Ultimo Dragon, and this went about as long as the Jericho-Eddie match, and it didn't need to. It's wild that I got to meet Ultimo at an indie show in Seattle in March of 2019. Fun fact about that, just quickly, because I'm going to go through some of these matches quickly. The previous night, I was working Thursdays at the time. It was before AEW and before I decided to ban my days off together. Because sometimes I was getting Tuesdays, Fridays off. Sometimes I was getting Wednesdays, Fridays off. Nevertheless, I ended up driving home because we're in Washington State and it's a little bit of weird weather. We got flash snow and got like 4 inches of snow. 4.5 inches of snow or something like that. And even though it was wet snow and it was cold enough to snow, I barely made it up my hill because I got a little commuter car. And I was like, I texted my friend. I said, I got home. He texted her, did you get home safe? Because he knows where I live. I know where you live. He said, let's see if this snow melts off. By the time I woke up 9 a.m. the day of the show, you wouldn't have even known it snowed. It was just one of those freak accidents. Ultimo Dragon, by the way, couldn't have been nicer. He had a guy with him working with the merch that spoke better English, because Ultimo's grasp of English is limited. But then he went out and competed against Matt Cross, and that was really nice. So that being said, little sidebar there. This needed more chin locks, because Alex Wright was just poking his big bratwurst right in Ultimo Dragon's back. The outside moonsault got a pop. Alex took over with a dive. We got a powerbomb off the top for 2. A moonsault for 2. We got near falls that went on for a bit too long. A dragon sleeper that got stopped. And then the German suplex by Alex. 1, 2, 3. So I had no problem with him retaining the TV championship. He lost it before Halloween Havoc, if I recall correctly. But that was it. And the pay-per-view just kept rolling on. Mean Gene was plugging his hotline. The NWO walks by, the NWO team for War Games, and they beat up Curt Henning. Except they didn't. Jeff Jarrett, in his last WCW pay-per-view match for just over 2 years, had Deborah in his corner, took on Dean Malenko, sent Deborah to the back. Deborah came out later. And this match was Jarrett trying to prove that he belonged with the Horsemen, because Dean had an association with the Horsemen. And Jarrett sucks chance, and Chinlock City. I mean, my God, it just went on forever. A superplex by Dean. There was good action here, but something about this pay-per-view felt off. Deborah came back out. We got more leg focus because Jarrett used the figure 4 as a finish. Got the figure 4 on. Dean tapped out. 14 minutes when 10 or 11 would have done just fine. NWO team pre-tape. I'm very certain everybody was drunk. So we get Wrath, a.k.a. Brian Clark, and Mortis, a.k.a. Chris Kanyon, with James Vanderberg, a.k.a. James Mitchell. Almost said Dr. James Mitchell, and that wouldn't have been right. Took on the Faces of Fear, Barbarian and Ming. Oh boy, Ming's here. Don't piss him off. They pissed him off, and then he showed mercy and didn't kill them. Kanyon was very good. Brian Clark always sucked. He got better than when he was a Night Stalker, but he couldn't have gotten any worse. He looked great with Bryan Adams. No, not that one. When they were just standing there as Chronic and they would just hit a couple moves and that's it. The problem is he couldn't wrestle. And it was proven by the fact that from Night Stalker to Chronic to that, he pretty much done. I mean, I think Chronic showed up in All Japan for a little bit in 2002. That was it. This match was not great. There was this huge powerbomb to Kanyon, and Kanyon bumped like a champ in this. Ming basically got mad and put the Tongan Death Grip on both guys, and then the finish was the death penalty, a.k.a. the meltdown, that Wrath would hit, 1, 2, 3, and that was it. So that was 10 minutes for maybe 4 minutes of action. But then again, I'm not going to tell Barb and Ming that they were just working with one good talent and one slug. But there we are. Oh boy. That just, Jesus Christ. So, Benoit basically then makes jokes about Kevin Nash being a bunch of gimmicks. And Flair is all fired up. And we're going to move on from there. If you notice, I'm not offering a ton of match analysis because realistically, this show has not aged well. At all. And there's just stuff about this show that just kind of limps along. And, of course, Mean Gene's going to try to offer an update on Curt Henning a little bit later on. But first, we get the Giant against Scott Norton. And Scott Norton did the job here. Scott could have easily killed the Giant if he wanted to, even as big as the Giant was. There was a suplex outside. Norton picked up Giant and did a stun gun on the ropes. I mean, with no effort. I mean, it took effort, but he made it look easy. And then a little bit later, after some chops, Giant's down. He does a kip up with the ropes. He's a 7-foot tall man doing a kip up. That's pretty impressionable. That's pretty impressive. He does a choke slam, big pop, 1, 2, 3. There you go. That was a nice 5-minute match. And if they just had a couple more matches like that, it might have made it better. Because there were some matches that should have not gone on as long as they did. So, DDP and Lex Luger. Luger fresh off of losing a title after 5 days. DDP fresh well, fresh off of a couple matches with Randy Savage, still's got one more singles match to go. Conveniently, Randy Savage is here, and Scott Hall is also here. And Miss Elizabeth is in the corner. And Larry Zbyszko is on commentary and really starts to get pissed when the referees get bumped. And Luger's in between both the rings because, the War Games stuff and everything. And they didn't have the panel like WWE has, so you could fall right between the rings. Elizabeth keeps attacking Paige. She keeps just mauling him, getting right in his face. And God, I wish that was me. I don't have issues. You have issues. Hall hits the ref. Hall hits the second ref. I think the first ref was Brian Hildebrand, who took a great bump because it's Brian. Referee Mark Curtis. Bless him. I wish he was still around. Larry's had enough. Confronts Scott. And then Luger eventually rises up. I think takes a bit longer to get to his spot than he should. And eventually Larry gets in a shoving match. Shoves Hall. Luger rolls him up. Fast count 1, 2, 3. Because Luger was going to get the victory, and Larry was building his feud with Scott Hall. And Larry, I think, might have been the most over person in that whole exchange, which is cool. Mean Gene plugs a hotline. Michael Buffer gets his payday going over the rules of War Games, which takes about 8 million years, what Michael Buffer talking about. So it's Team NWO, Nash, Buff, Conan, and Six. So it's Nash and Six. And Conan was fine, but Conan, by this point, was really getting worn down. And after certain comments that he made on WWE's most recent AAA show, I don't really have any sympathy for him, but I'm not really surprised he thinks that way. So, Team Horsemen, Flair, Benoit, and Mongo. So it's 3-on-4. Oh, wait, Henning's going to come out later. Gee, I wonder what's going to happen. So Benoit and Buff start. Benoit used the War Games format with the time limits and everything before he moved on to the next person for June 23rd and 24th, 2007. Yeah, I'm going to say that because he's a fucking murderer, and I got to use dark humor. Otherwise, I'm going to yell about him. And the thing is there were moments like Six getting sent into the goddamn roof and Mongo calling out his spots because bless Mongo. Bless the guy. He'd had a hard-hitting career in the NFL. He wasn't a great commentator, but he had enthusiasm. He wasn't a great wrestler, but he had enthusiasm. But he didn't know shit about calling a match. And he had to call out his spots. It's like John Cena. John Cena saw Mongo as a prototype. Har har. So, Nash comes out last. And we won Sting chance. And Henning comes out, takes the sling off that he had, and he's not injured at all. He's got cuffs, and then he instantly goes and hits Mongo, and then hits everybody. Oh, what? It was a swerve? You don't say. Everybody's cuffed, and they're trying to get Benoit to say he quits or whatever. You want to say it. The dogs are in the enclosed pool area, and the side garage door is open. That's not what we wanted you to say, Chris. But Flair has his head in the door, and the idea is, okay, you want to save him, you got to say you quit. It's submissive or surrender. That's it. And basically Mongo says, stop it. So they do, and then they stop the door with Flair's head. And that's it. And then that is how the show ends. Literally with the Horsemen dying in the spot in one of their strongholds. Yeah, that's Fall Brawl 97, everybody. It is not necessarily a great show. I think I spent more time on the facts and figures than I spent on the actual pay-per-view. But the thing is it's also an important show because it would carry them into the fall where things are really starting to ramp up with Halloween Havoc 97 and culminating with Starrcade, 1997. When all they had to do was put Sting over clean. They didn't do that because he didn't have a tan, brother. But hey, at least Hogan wasn't on this show. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky handles in the description. I'm John Ritlin, and until we go to War Games again, happy trails to you.